Welcome to the BrightWord Books Podcast. BrightWord is a leading platform for diverse storytelling, where voices from all backgrounds can share their unique narratives and connect with readers from around the world. Follow our regular podcast updates, where we strive to foster a literary community that celebrates creativity, inclusivity, and the transformative power of literature.
Bring you heartfelt conversations with authors who inspire, challenge, and move us with their stories. And today, we are honored to welcome back Tamara L. Miller for her third appearance on the show. And she's the author of What the Hell Just Happened, which is a powerful and deeply personal book about the sudden, devastating loss of her husband after 58 years of marriage. Now, in her writing, she shares not only her raw grief, but also practical wisdom, emotional honesty, and even moments of humor as she navigates love, loss, and the unexpected turns of life. Over the past episodes, Tamara has opened her heart to us, and today we'll reflect on how her journey has evolved, the ways her book has touched readers, and the lasting lessons she hopes others will carry forward. Whether you are here for guidance, comfort, or inspiration, this conversation is sure to stay with you. So, Ms. Tamara L. Miller, glad to see you, glad to meet you.
Oh, hi, glad to be here.
Very nice. Welcome back. Well, it's a privilege to have you for this third time. And looking back at your journey since your very first interview, what stands out to you the most about how far you've come?
Well, probably that I'm pretty much on my own, and I feel like I'm pretty dependent, but then there's things that'll knock my socks off and I go, whoa, I'm not as dependent as I thought I was. But of course, I thought I was very dependent until I lost my husband. And then I realized what a weakling I was, and things I didn't know that I should have known. And that was what the book premised me for, is to let other women know things that they need to plan ahead that they don't think about, like the sprinklers, where the electrician would go if he needed to do some housework, things like that I never paid any attention to. I didn't need to. He knew all those things, so I didn't need to. So the book was kind of based on that, things that, hey, you gals, you need to know about this and you need to know about that. But I have found that men have picked it up too, and they said, my wife pays all the bills and I don't have an idea what the passwords are. So it helps the gents too. It's the same thing as the gals. So
yeah. So you surprised yourself in how far you've come, how much stronger you've gotten, and you say, hey, the lesson for the rest of us is know how things work. Know how to shut off the circuit breaker or the water main, know the password. You never know when you might need it, husband or wife.
Yeah, right.
Well, great. Well, now that you've shared your story with countless readers and listeners, how has telling your story repeatedly shaped your own healing process?
Well, knowing how receptive everybody was really made me feel good. And going through all these steps, writing the book, I think was really very healing. But what has surprised me is now that the book is out and I'm doing these podcasts, I'm starting to get sad again. Going through it all over again from the beginning and writing it and then talking about it, I'm starting to get sad. So I had to grab myself. Hey, this is just the place you're at right now. Remember, Tam, this is your journey. So buckle up, big girl. Put your big girl pants on and let's go. So
yeah. Buckle up for those ups and downs, right? You hear that grief and healing is never a straight line. You still have those bad days. It still hits you pretty hard. But what's good is that you put it into writing. It's therapeutic. It's expressive. And now you're even going on these PR podcast tours to tell us all about it. And it's helped people, right? You go on Amazon and you search this book, What the Hell Just Happened by Tamara L. Miller, and you can see some reviews on there. And I like to do that, right? I'm like, should I buy this? You see what the reviews are. And one Amazon reviewer said, This was a really great read. It tells it just like it is. I lost my husband a couple years back, and it covers every emotion and every feeling. It was my loss all over again. So hearing that, how does it feel to know your book resonates so deeply with those walking through their own grief?
Oh, that's just a thrill because that was the purpose. And to know that other people are finding that it's helping them through the grieving processes. I know there was some hints in there, things you need to do to try to get a happy day out of when you're so down and out. And how the title came up, I just thought I had myself all together, and it was probably about maybe a month had gone by, and it was a little bit after the funeral. And one day I just collapsed on the kitchen floor and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And I said, what the hell just happened? So that's how I came up with my book title. Yeah.
Unexpectedly in that way. And it seems like it fits so well. So we look
It
at
does, yes.
yeah. We look at another review of someone that said, this was an excellent book. Wonderful practical advice for before, during, and after the death of a loved one. I cried and I laughed. I highly recommend this book. So were you surprised at how much humor and relatability people found in your story, even with all this tragedy?
No, I added the humor. My husband was quite a character. And so there was a lot of humor stories I could add. I didn't want someone to read the book and go, oh boy, is that depressing. So I threw in some of the stories. You want to hear one of the stories? It's really crazy.
Yes, please.
Okay. We were on a bowling league, and we were through bowling, and the bowling league had a cocktail lounge. So we went in and we were going to have a cocktail, then we were going to go home. And we ran into one of our friends. In fact, he sang at our wedding. His name was Ray Collins, and he sang with Mother's Adventures. And he says, hey, you guys aren't ready to call it a night, are you? And my husband says, no, what's up? He says, well, I've got these places where I go and we all rap and do our things. And he says, come on, go with me and I'll have you sing along. He says, okay. We got in the car. I said, Randall, you don't know how to sing. He says, it'll be okay. He says, Ray said just to follow him, we'd be fine. So we got to this place, and of course they were checking IDs, and Ray says, they're with me. So there was another couple that he had dragged with him. So we were sitting down, and of course it's like 2:00 in the morning. We were ordering breakfast, and they called Ray up to the stage. And then the announcer says, we're so excited to have the Hollywood Argyles here. That wasn't who we were. That was another group that was very famous. So they called Randall up and his other friend. And Ray told him, he says, you just follow me. And I want you to go doo-doo-wah, doo-doo-wah. That was what their thing was. They got so out of sync with each other that they came over and they told Ray, you have to leave. They came over and took our breakfast dishes away. Randall came, he says, I think we have to go. I says, yeah, I think so. That was the first time I ever got thrown out of any place. And I found that quite embarrassing.
Yeah, embarrassing in the moment, but funny to look back on. And then
At first I was mad. And when we went out to the parking lot, I kind of looked around to see if there was anybody there that I knew because I was so embarrassed. Then when we got past that and realized how ridiculous he looked, we laughed all the rest of the way home. And that's one of the stories. Whenever the family gets together, they say, remember Papa when he thought he was going to sing the song and we got kicked out? So that story always comes up, and that was a little bit of the humor.
Oh yeah, the phrase is you'll look back and laugh, and sometimes you have to look at what you're going through in the moment of all shapes and sorts and say, I'll look back and laugh. And so many readers say they finish the book in just one day. So what do you think makes your story so gripping and relatable?
Well, I think the book kept changing. I have little side stories in there. I have a side story about my mother. We thought she went to heaven. We have the stories about the medium. I think that really kept people's interest because that is so interesting. And so I think as they read, there was each chapter, there was something more that got the reader more involved. And I think that, especially the stories about the medium, I think that was a real clue to getting the readers just sticking with it till they were through with the book.
Cool. So there's something for everyone and many of
Yeah.
these side quests, the kids call them.
Yes.
Great. Well, you've often emphasized preparedness emotionally, practically, and financially. Since your second interview, have new lessons emerged that you would now add to your advice list?
I don't have anything else to add, but I think what you need to know is even if you do all those things I tell you to do in the book, and even if you find out all the things you need to know about the house and the computer, you are still not going to be ready. So don't ever think I'm ready, especially if it's a long illness. With Randall, it wasn't. It was just a shock out of the blue. One day he was here and the next day he was gone. So of course I wasn't ready. But even if you were a long illness, and I had a friend after Randall passed away, and we became a couple for 5 years, and he had a stroke. So I saw that coming. But even knowing that it was coming, I wasn't ready. So be prepared the best you can, but remember, you're never going to be ready for that loss.
Very helpful. Well, good advice. And we look at these reader reviews, and many people mention how practical your book is, even in what you just mentioned, right? So, why do you think it's so important to balance emotional honesty with concrete advice?
Well, advice is always good. And then when you're trying to take somebody else's advice, and maybe you're grieving, your emotions get in the way, and you kind of set things aside, and you can really get off track. Your emotions can take you off track. And I guess that's it. And the financial advice I gave was from the very beginning. You need to have a trust. You need to have a will and a trust. Don't wait till you need it. Get it today, because we got ours like 5 years before I needed it, but it was a good thing we had that all in place. And it's just those things. And in the back of the book, there is lists where you can put down your passwords for paying bills, who your insurance is with, who you need to call if I die, some things like that. But they're helpful if you have that to go to. And it's good, and I'm a procrastinator because I tell my daughter all these things. And I haven't filled out all the information in the book, but I've got a family trust that really lays everything out for that. But thanks for reminding me. I need to get those forms filled out.
Very nice. So, yeah, we all need to, right? We're all locked in this destination for death. And if we have the pleasure and the luck and the fortune of living long enough, we'll have some of these medical events, or our loved ones will. So get these things figured out. Now we're talking about preparation. So what's one overlooked area of preparation that still surprises people when they lose a partner?
Well, I imagine if it's a spouse, if it's a husband, they do so many things around the yard. So you don't have to ever know those things because he's going to be here forever. So you don't pay attention to the things that he always does because he's always going to be here to fix it. So I think that's some preparation. Preparation is you better pay attention because you're going to need those things. And the same thing if it was a man losing his wife and she's paying all the bills, that he better find out what those passwords are. I had a friend who, unfortunately, she was in a wheelchair and she only had one leg. I tell this story in the book. And her husband was Randall's best friend, and she called me in the morning and she says, Tam, she says, Jack just died. I found him on the couch. He's dead. He just died. I said, Carol, I'll be right there. Well, and the days followed. He took care of everything because she was in a wheelchair. She couldn't get around. He cooked all the dinners. He did all the groceries. He did all the banking. He knew where all the papers were with the truck and cars. She knew nothing. She didn't know where her bank was. She didn't know how to get cash. She didn't know where the checks were. I mean, she was just a total loss. But she had two daughters, and I worked with the daughters, and we got that all taken care of. But I just thought about being unprepared. She was really unprepared.
Yeah, well, so pay attention, and then it seems like it goes both ways, doesn't it? Where if we have our partner or family, you think you're being nice by doing everything for them, but then you're leaving them out of what they might need to know after you.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, well, you have you have these interesting stories, right? You have the funny ones and the sad ones, and you shared about the story earlier in your interviews about connecting with a medium. So has your spiritual journey taken any new turns since then?
Well, because this all came about, I'd like to get a hold of her again. One of our last sessions she came to the house and she let me have 9 friends. And at the end of the session, she said to me, she says, you know, the other night when you felt something on your back, and I was shocked because I hadn't told anybody, the kids or nothing. She says, that was him. He was visiting you and he was touching you on your back. I was just shocked. I thought it was the dog. But how would she know that? And then I said to her, I said, I want him to come back. I've got to see him again. I want him to come back. She says, he can't. He's busy. That kind of irritated me. Busy? Busy doing what? You know, you think, what is there in heaven? Well, how could you be busy? She says he has to get used to his heavenly body, how to get that around, and he's also becomes a greeter. So he greets his friends when they come. So I got really wondering, what is heaven like? And there happens to be a story in the book about my mother. Do I have time to tell this story?
Yeah, we do. Of course.
Okay. She was in assisted living. And I go see her every once in a while, and she had hospice care. Hospice care called me at work one day, and they said, you need to come right away, Tam. We think maybe your mother's end is close. So I went right to Mom, and Mom was semi-comatose. I didn't know, I assumed that she could hear me. You know how they say, always talk anyway, because they can probably hear you.
Yeah.
And so I called my boss. I said, listen, I got to take some time off. I want to stay with my mother because she only has a couple days. So one day went by. She never woke up. Nothing ever happened. Hospice came. Next day went by. Nothing ever happened. She never came out. Her eyes never opened. She never said anything. And the third day, it was in the morning. And at the care facility, I went down to the kitchen to get a cup of coffee, and they always want to know how Mom was. On the way back, I heard her yelling my name, Tam, Tammy, come quick, Tammy. And I ran down the hall because as far as I was concerned, you know, she was still under. And when I got there, she threw her arms around me. She said, oh, she says, where have you been? You finally found me. I was so lost. I says, Mom, I'm right here. She says, I want to go to my room. I said, this is your room. And so I pointed out all the furniture and everything. And then we started talking. I said, Mom, I said, do you know you've been sleeping for 3 days? She stopped. She says, I have. I said, yes. I said, you remember anything before you went to sleep? She says, well, there was something happened before I went to sleep, but I didn't want to tell you because you'd think I was going crazy. She said there was an older couple that was sitting there on the couch every night for like 2 or 3 nights. That couple was sitting on the couch. They never said anything to me. I never asked them what they were there for. And nobody else, when they came in, seemed to see them. She says, you never saw them when you came in, and I didn't want to tell you. She says, then one night, she says, they said, you need to come with us. So she says, I went. She says, and I can't tell you how I got there. I can't quite remember, but it seemed like, oh, she says, I just can't remember how, but I came to this beautiful place. She says, it was like a castle. She says, everything was gold and everybody was so friendly. And there was this really pretty young girl with long blonde hair. She took my hand and she says, come with me. She says, you've had a long journey. You need to rest. So I went with her. And she says, she laid me down on the bed, and I laid in the bed, and she says, I don't know how long I slept, but I assumed it was a long time. She says she came in one day and she said, it's time for you to go. It's not your time yet. I assumed that she had gone to heaven and they were sending her back. It's giving me chills again to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
I can't explain it any other way. So that's a piece of heaven that seemed very peaceful. And she remembered all those little details, but she didn't know she'd been asleep in the bed that long. And she lived 2 more years after that.
Very cool. So you're giving us a wonderful taste of the stories that we'll find in this book, right? And we've been saying that there's the emotion and there's also the practical advice. There's also the logic. There's quite a mix because we need both to survive, right? We need to sometimes process these things, and especially grief, right? Grief is just such a mixed ball of wax, isn't it? And so with time and distance from your initial loss, how has your view of grief itself changed? Do you see grief differently now than when you first wrote the book?
I don't see it differently, but it doesn't hurt as bad as it did in the beginning. You're never going to get over grief. You're going to have grief the rest of your life. It's like now, now that all this is coming up again, I don't know whether I have grief, but I'm so sad. But it's okay. It's okay. Grief does not mean forgetting. You don't forget all those memories. And during the grief, you think of all those memories. And those are good times. And you have the memories, but you have to remember you need to live in the present. You can't live in the past and the memories. So you have to find yourself. Again, what I said in the book is reinvent yourself. Who are you? Who are you really? I was Randall's wife. I was Mindy and Corey's mother. That's who I was. He's gone. So I'm not Randall's wife again. I'm still the kid's mother. But who am I? I need to find out who I am. And I needed to keep busy. That is a key right there. You have to keep busy. So I joined a women's club, volunteered women, and I got so busy with that, I ended up becoming president for 4 years. But I think that saved me. That really saved me because it kept my mind on other things and not to be, when you're alone, you have grief, I think. But you just have to work your way through it and say, I'm just going to have this forever. And why not? It was good times.
Yes. So ask yourself these questions. Who am I? Reinvent myself. and stay busy, right? Don't just
Keep
be
busy.
sad.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the key. Keep busy.
You have all this great advice, and we've shared some of the comments the readers left, but how has your family responded to the ongoing impact of your story, especially seeing these readers share how much your book has helped them?
Well, they're pretty proud of me. I had, this was my 6th book. I have a 5-book series called Family Forever. So we always had book signings when I finished a book. This book finished when I had COVID. So I couldn't have book signings. People couldn't come and I couldn't go there. So it kind of got forgotten. That's why it's become a new edition. We're bringing it back out. And my daughter is probably my biggest fan. She worked for an insurance company, and somebody would come in. All they had to say was, "Oh, I just lost my wife," or "I just lost my husband." She'd say, "Here, you need to read this book." She always had extra copies. And she'd take it out. "You need to read this book. This is going to help you." And my granddaughters, they're 35 and 40. So they too, with their friends, any of them lose their mom or somebody that they know that they're going to feel sad about, they go, "Here, you need to read this book. My grandma wrote this. This is good advice. Take this book." So they're really fans.
Yeah, they're your little salespeople, but it's great
Yeah,
to have family like that, right?
yeah,
That have
it
family
is.
that not like supporting you is one thing, but they're helping spread the word. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And speaking of family, so you have your children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren. How have they carried forward your husband's memory, perhaps in ways that surprised you or touched you deeply?
Well, they seem to remember all the crazy stuff he did. And so whenever we get together, all comes out the silly stories that Papa did. And I'm not going to remind them what a good person he was and how he was a provider. I think they know that, but I get a kick out of it that they always like the funny stories. We went to, he hated to pay to get in someplace because he figured his bar tab was big enough, he shouldn't have to pay to go in.
Mhm.
So he told somebody, we were on the plane and I was reading a book, and he says, "What are you reading?" I told him, I says, "It's my favorite author." And he says, "Who is it?" I said, "Sidney Sheldon." So we got to this place. It was a comedy show, and they wanted a door fee. He says, "I'm not paying a door fee." And they said, "Well, you have to." He says, "Well, maybe you don't know who I am." Well, they said, "Who?" He says, "I'm Sidney Sheldon." They go, "Oh." He says, "I'm a famous author." And they said, "Oh, okay." And next thing I know, we're in the second row.
Mhm.
Best seats in the house. So they announced, the MC came out and says, "We're very honored tonight that we have a famous author in the crowd, Sidney Sheldon." He stands up and starts waving. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get thrown out again. And sure enough, so I thought, well, somebody must not know Sidney Sheldon because Randall was like 20 years younger than him. But somebody must have known him because they came down with their little flashlights, the little ushers, and said, "Sir, can we speak to you a minute?" So he got up and he had to go to the lobby. And I thought, oh boy, I'm next. I'm going to get thrown out again. So sure enough, they came back and they got me. "Ma'am, would you please come into the lobby?" And we got thrown out. So that story always comes up too. The kids always remember the silly stories. So, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
good. It's happy. We laugh. Yeah.
And I'm sensing a pattern, right? That if you impersonate a somewhat famous celebrity, then you can get into places you otherwise wouldn't without paying.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so
Until they find out.
till yeah, and never lasts, and then it's a trespassing, but luckily that they just take you out of there. But it's
Yeah.
one of those things you learn navigating life, and so
Yeah.
you've learned a few things, you've taught a few things, and now you've done 3 podcast appearances. So after these 3 appearances, what has been the most rewarding part of sharing your journey so publicly?
The acceptance of the book. What the readers say is the most rewarding part, because they take things at heart. And some of the people that I talk to that are friends, one of my friends, and I thought it was very nice, at one of the end of last podcast, I said, everybody's got a story. Write a book. You've got a story. Now you sit down and write a book. And I saw her a week later. She said, Tammy, I saw your podcast. And she says, I'm writing a book. She says, my husband passed away about 8 years ago. And the family really doesn't know him. They don't know the good side. They don't know what he did in high school. They don't know how well he was in the job. She says, so I'm sitting down and writing a book. I thought that was such a compliment. And it made me so happy for her because she was just loving it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And we all have these machines in front of us, right? We have a phone, we can write, a computer, we can print, we can publish on demand, we can go with a publisher. And our ancestors sure as heck couldn't do that, right? Centuries ago, if you had something to say, well, maybe you'd pass along to your kids, grandkids, but then whatever stories you had would be lost. But now we can put them in print. They can become immortalized. So you say, if you out there in podcast land have your own story to tell, advice to give, if you've figured a few things out emotionally, heck, put it in print. And speaking of publishing books, let's talk about you and maybe your future books, because some readers hope that you, Tam Miller, might write more. So do you feel that another book, like maybe a continuation of life and healing after the first wave of grief, do you think that might be in your future?
Well, I told you, I really felt when Randall passed, my life was over. What more was there for me, And the fellow that introduced Randall to me, I had dated when I was 16. And I hadn't seen him for a long time after he introduced me to Randall. So at Randall's funeral, there he was. 60 years later, there was John. And he started calling me. And we would talk on the phone. We'd have such a good time. But he'd ask me to go to lunch or dinner, and I just, no, I just couldn't. He called me for 2 years before I went to dinner with him. So I thought, we're having so much fun on the phone, and we have so many people that we know in common. What would it hurt? So I went, and sure enough, we became a couple for 5 years. And I'm sure Randall would have approved of it too. And it was a good time. So don't close that door. Don't close that door, because you've lost a loved one. I know I would never love John like I loved Randall, but there was some wonderful times we had together. And he died of a stroke, so that was kind of sad. I was a little bit of a caregiver there near the end.
Okay, well, there's a lot to life, right? There's many ups and downs, but you say that sometimes don't close that door. Sometimes what could it hurt? And sometimes we say, what the hell just happened? And that's why we can jump into your book and find out some of this. So this is your last podcast with us. So what do you think is the lasting message you would like listeners to carry with them about love, loss, and living forward?
Well, you're going to grieve, and you're going to grieve forever. And that's okay. That was someone you loved. Even if it was your mother and dad, you're going to grieve over it. But don't make that your life. They're gone. This is your journey now. You have a new life, and you need to do for yourself. You'll never forget them. Days go by. I think of Randall. I think of him one time or another during the day. And the same thing with my mother that's gone and my dad. I think of them. So, just make the best of it. It's not the end. It's your journey now. Now keep busy. Get involved in the community maybe. and keep busy, and there's life out there, and you've got friends, and help your friends get through their times when they have a loss.
Very nice. Get busy and get busy on helping those friends. And it's interesting duality, isn't it? That on one hand, grief doesn't go away, but on the other hand, you must continue. And so they're giving us so much to think about. And that brings us to the close of today's episode of the BrightWord Books Podcast. That's a tongue twister, right?
That's a mouthful, yeah.
The BrightWord Books Podcast. We want to give a heartfelt thank you to Tamara L. Miller for joining us once again and sharing her story with such courage, grace, and candor. Her book is called What the Hell Just Happened? It's more than a memoir. It's a guide. It's a companion. It's a testament to resilience in the face of unimaginable loss. And if you haven't yet picked up a copy, we encourage you to do so and experience the depth of her journey for yourself. Now, this may be Tamara's final appearance with us, but her voice, her love story, and her message will continue to resonate. As she reminds us, while grief reshapes us, it does not define us. We can carry love forward and find strength in unexpected places. And we want to thank you for listening to the BrightWord Books Podcast. Until next time, keep reading, keep reflecting, and keep finding light in the stories around you.
You've been listening to the BrightWord Books Podcast, home of the literary community that celebrates creativity, inclusivity, and the transformative power of literature. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss future episodes. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.